Welcome, everyone. I am Yvonne Archie, the owner and founder of Secure Self Consulting, where our primary mission is to consult, educate, and provide individuals with tools to increase and leverage financial literacy to not only save money but build wealth. And I am back with Justin Banks, a mental health advocate, for our Wealth and Wellness series, which this week we are talking about Know Thyself, the
Mhm.
powerful benefits of self-awareness. So for this episode, I'm going to let Justin go ahead and kick this off on what self-awareness looks like, and how we can primarily, drive self-awareness in a mental and physical aspect. And then I'll tie it in on the later half or in between on the financial implications and what that looks like.
Yeah, so when it comes to like self-awareness, it's really the first step, I think, in terms of making change. No matter what you want to do financially, mentally, physically, no matter what you're trying to do, you have to first acknowledge who you are at the time. And that's not an easy thing to do. So often we try to make it look like healing is this process where you're just meditating and you're drinking your tea and everything is good, but it's not like that. Sometimes you really have to face some deep, dark tunnels, those deep alleyways that you never really want to go into. Um, so when it comes to self-awareness, we're talking about really knowing thyself. And people think that, yeah, I know who I am, I know this, I know that. But if you know who you are, as TD Jakes says, if you know who you know who you are not. And so often people who think they know themselves are different people depending on the audience they're with at the time. So no matter what if your friend group is changing, whether you're here or you're there, if you're becoming those group of people every time, you're always switching. You're never who you're supposed to be. So that's something that we need to acknowledge when it comes to self-awareness. That's one thing. It's just that ability to focus on oneself. Can I accept my own constructive criticism? Can I just accept who I am as a person, whether it's positive or negative at the time? So there's a lot of different ways you can do it physically. Of course, that could just be going to the doctor and figuring out what your numbers are. People hate the doctor. I'm not a fan of it, but I know I have to go to know who I am. Yeah, you have to do it mentally. You know, how am I feeling? Like sometimes people think that if I'm out there going crazy and I'm harming somebody else or I'm harming myself, then that means that's the only time you're mentally unstable. But if you're sad too often, if you isolate too often, if you're always afraid all the time, that is unstable. So you have to acknowledge that and not be afraid of that. Then emotionally, it's the same thing. Am I angry all the time? And then when it gets to the finances, am I mishandling my money? I ended, at least with this, I know personally, like I had a whole bunch of free trials that you add that credit card to. And then all of a sudden it's over. And then you realize, okay, they took money out of my account. They took money out of my account. Planet Fitness and all these gyms, they make so much money off of people who aren't even working out anymore. But they never forgot to take their credit card off and they still getting $10 a month. And then they yearly 54 or something like
That
that.
auto debt, that's what it's
Yes,
called.
yes, and it is crazy. So it's things like that that we have to acknowledge and try to enjoy that process. So we can go deeper with it. We'll talk about it later on. But that's just like the quick basis of just knowing, okay, who am I in this space?
Yeah. I kind of want to tap into one of the first things that you said, and I'm gonna just paraphrase it. If you're always a chameleon every
Mm,
time you change your environment,
mm.
nobody knows who you really are.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
when you look in your mirror, what are you portraying if you're not portraying yourself? And one thing that I try to encourage people all the time, just from a individual standpoint, people are going to love you for the charisma that you have individually.
Hmm.
So there is something about everyone uniquely that you don't have to change
Hmm.
you don't have to change and try to fit in with any particular individual.
Hmm.
If you have a conversation, you guys hit it off, great. If you have a conversation, you're like, oh, well, this is awkward,
Hmm.
take that as a learning lesson. Every individual that you come across from is a learning experience.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And you don't cross anyone's path by coincidence.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
something to be learned from every encounter that you have, whether that's gaining your insight in any particular way it may be. But when we're talking about self-awareness, it's definitely knowing who you are as an individual. So
Yeah.
like those morals, those values that don't change regardless of whomever and whoever you are around.
Yeah. And what I really like about what you're saying is I try to sometimes tell adults like just because you're at this certain age does not mean that you're as grown as you think. Because it kind of teaches me that when I teach kids and we work on things, I'm like, I know adults that couldn't do this. Like for example, we try to teach kids to do something called an elevator speech. I don't know if you heard of it, but if you're like in the elevator, yeah, and then somebody's next to you, can you describe yourself in 30 seconds? And of course, the kids struggle with it because now you have to really analyze what are my positives? Yeah, who am I? Who can I tell you who I am? And there are so many adults that cannot do that. And if I ask you, tell me about yourself, you'll see a lot of people that talk about a whole bunch of different things you don't need to know in job interviews, go all over the place because they don't really know how can I sell myself to you in 30 seconds? How can I tell you three good things about myself, how I'm beneficial to you, now I'm beneficial to myself. And that's where that self-awareness comes in. And it feels
Mhm.
so good to kind of know who you are. So no matter what environment you're in, your foundation is still strong. You're not going to teeter me off. And then the people around you will respect who you are. That's the big thing.
Yes.
That look, Justin, that's just how he is. Look, we just gonna let that go. I'm still gonna love you. I'm still gonna be your friend, but I might not do everything that you do
Mhm.
because I'm aware of who I am. And that's where the power comes. And so often we don't get that. And that, especially when it comes to finances, look, we go into the club, I'm buying whatever you buying, and you might not have the same income that that person has. It's stressful.
That part right there. But
Yeah.
you definitely said something that I kind of wanted to emphasize is the that respect factor.
Mhm.
If you can stand on what is valuable to you, you will actually have more respect from an individual or a group of people versus being a people pleaser.
Mhm. Yep.
And that is something that needs to be emphasized. Be yourself. And like you said, once you have those values, and that elevator speech is big.
Yes, it
It
is.
is big
Yes, it is.
because anytime you meet somebody, that elevator speech can really be reused and recycled. Like,
Mhm.
yes, you can have something that, correlates more on your work
Mhm.
perspective. Like, hey, this is what I do for, my 9 to 5. But you can also use it to filter in like, hey, my morals and values.
It's also good. It's so good to also acknowledge what your negatives are too, as
Mhm.
much as you acknowledge your positives. The stuff that we're saying. People think they know it until it's time to actually put it into action. Like, yeah, I know I got to focus on my negatives and this, and that, but they never really do it because their actions remain the same. And if you can focus on what those negatives are, that's how you start changing that pain into power. Quick plug. So,
Yeah,
so
that's the name of his podcast. For a
yes,
few
yes.
people are like, what's going on? Justin has a podcast called Pain of Power, so be sure to check it out.
I
But
appreciate
continue.
that, right? But yeah, so like even for myself, I want to normalize like even us as we're speaking, we're not saying this because we're experts. We're saying this because we're going through this
Where
even
we've
at this moment.
experienced it.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Absolutely.
like for even myself, I had to acknowledge it seemed like since I was born, I always tried to work really hard. I always trying to have a good work ethic. But at the same time, I'm overthinking. I'm trying to be a perfectionist. So that hard work is good, but if I'm overthinking the entire way, I never think that I'm good enough. And I know so many people who, a lot of us feel that way. Most of us feel that way, that we're never doing enough. And that is a negative. But if I kind of turn that around and kind of acknowledge, okay, who am I really? What can I really do? What should I be grateful for? What are my positives? And once I kind of started putting those pieces together, I didn't overthink as much because like I know I'm doing okay. And that goes a long way. You know what I mean?
You hit on two things. The first thing I want to talk about is when you're doing that self-assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So when you become self-aware, you do an internal self-assessment. And one thing that I've learned is that you have your 5 key components of who you are as an individual.
Okay.
So
What
those are
would
your
be
top
those?
strengths
Mm-hmm.
as who you are as an
Mm-hmm.
individual. However you might want to classify it, that's who you are as an individual. And
Yeah.
when you focus on some of what they call kind of like your dark moments, you only want to
Yes.
focus on 3.
Mm.
So you have your positive, and your strengths are always going to outweigh your dark moments.
Yes. I love
Because
that.
your dark moment can be something as simple for me, even though I'm highly energetic, I love talking to people. One thing that doesn't naturally always connects is networking.
Mm. Yep.
Because I thrive off of genuine connections. So forced networking is not a place for me. So because I know that about myself, in corporate environments, when we have to do what I consider
Mm-hmm.
mandatory fun,
Yes.
then
Yes.
I try to figure out innovative ways on, okay, how am I going to utilize this situation to work best for me as an individual?
Yeah.
Because I've done that self-assessment on myself. And so I'm self-aware that, hey, I don't like mandatory or forced interaction.
Yeah.
But
And
I know that there are certain things that I can do and certain conversations I can have, probe certain questions, so
mm-hmm.
that if the individual say like, hey, I enjoy giving back to the community, that's my entry point.
Yeah.
Hey, I enjoy reading, I enjoy traveling, that's my entry point, because now I found something that we can actually speak on, that
Yeah.
we share the same interest in. And
Yeah.
so that was something like when we think about self-awareness and kind of like building that elevator speech, understanding ourselves as an individual. Yes, you have 5 key components, that probably are not going to ever change about who you are as an individual. But
Yeah.
when you do that self-assessment, you're only going to want to focus on 3 things at that particular time, because they may change.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like maybe within, a couple of years or so, networking won't even be my problem. Maybe it'll be something else that is just like, it's not even a problem. It's just a pain point at that particular time.
Yeah. I
Let
hear
me
you.
like fix that. It's not ever a problem. It's just a pain point. It's not your strength, but it's not really a weakness. It's just kind of like your pain point at that moment.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes it's just because of your elevation, it's just a new challenge
I
because of your
assure you,
going up. And that's a good thing.
elevation brings new challenges,
Yeah.
which I think that is a key
From
component.
my perspective, I'm always focused on the physical and mental, but I wasn't always so focused on my finances. And that's something that I've just started to kind of learn more about. So I know I'm not the only one. So I guess my question to you, like, how can I make myself self-aware of what my finances are? Because it's not just how much I'm spending, it's where my money is, right? So how could you help somebody, especially my age, know how can I be self-aware of where my money is?
Yeah. So I think the first part is an assessment.
Okay.
And there's different tools that you can use. Um, I'm a finance professional for my 9 to 5, so I'm really good with Excel. But as millennials, we're very digital inclined.
Mm-hmm.
So one app that I utilize, this is not paid promotion, but one app that I do utilize that I suggest that everybody, is Mint.
Oh, yep. Okay.
The Mint app that actually is able to connect to, the different um, financial institutions that you conduct business with. If you're trading on Robinhood, it's able to connect to that as well, and
Mm-hmm.
actually breaks out and categorizes all of your spending habits. And
Mm-hmm.
within Mint, you can build your own budget. And that's what I think is super intuitive, because once you are self-aware of like, hey, financially, I'm just in a position where if that's consumer debt, maybe you have, high credit card balances.
Mm-hmm.
If that's something that you need to deal with, hey, instead for the next 3 months, that's what I'm gonna focus on. I'm gonna
Right.
focus on getting that down. Because if you have high consumer debt, you're gonna wanna trim it down to at least 30% utilization or less.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, snowball that. Snowball it with the avalanche mentality. So snowballing is basically taking the smallest amount of debt that you have and clearing it out the
Yeah.
fastest. But I say take it with an avalanche mentality, because avalanche is focusing not necessarily on the big ticket items, because that's what's more or less talking about, but it's more or less speaking on like, hey, that interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a $500 or $1,000 on a credit card with 20% interest, that's what you need to be focusing on, trying to get down.
For sure.
And that becomes into like that awareness part, because when you're able to actually look in it and be like, okay, this is where all my money is currently spending,
mm-hmm.
or is currently holding up, anywhere where it is credit cards or consumer debt, you know,
mm-hmm.
maybe you like retail shopping or in out, something like that, focus on that, because that's a controllable expense.
Yeah.
And tell yourself like, hey, this is where I'm going to focus on to remove that. Because once you handle consumer debt, then that's a positive increase for your credit.
Mm-hmm.
They connect.
Yeah.
And then once you get there, it's like, okay, now you acknowledge, you know, and you address everything that's going on. You know how to handle and manage your credit cards and consumer debt. You built a budget in place. Now it's like, okay, am I in a position where I need to save?
Yeah.
Okay, like maybe I just want to save $1,000 for, you know, a rainy day fund. I always say, you know, yes, you do need an emergency savings account. And they say typically 3 to 5 months. If $1,000 is all you can start off with that. And do what you can handle. And that's something that needs to be emphasized. When you're thinking about your financial journey, it is literally a financial journey.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, if it's, hey, I can only save $20 every pay period. Do that consistently, because if you show yourself that, hey, I can, you know, save up $20 every pay period and not touch it, that's establishing discipline. Because I always tell people, if you are working for somebody else and you never pay yourself out of your paycheck, you're doing it wrong.
Ooh, gotta write that one down. I like that. Okay.
If you're working for somebody else and you never pay, and you don't pay yourself first, you are doing it wrong when it comes to personal finance. Because why would you work for somebody a 9 to 5 and or longer, get paid either hourly or salary, get a check, and out of every check that you get, there is not a single dollar to your name that you are either saving or investing?
Yes. Amen. All right.
And so
right there.
that goes into that financial, you know, like that financial awareness piece.
Yeah.
And one thing that I like to tell people, always start off with your financial efficacy. And I know that might be a big word, but to break it down, that means how you feel and what you believe about your situation. And so maybe you're not in the best situation, financial situation, but instead of saying, I'm broke right now, just say, I'm in savings season. Because that means, one, you are placing a positive affirmation out there. And I'm big on that. If you keep saying you broke, somewhere, somehow in your life, you're going to be broken. But if you're saying, hey, I'm saving right now, I'm literally just evolving my financial situation. So that means if you're saving, yes, you may not be able to spend money on anything that's not contributing to your growth, but it's not that you don't have money. It's just that you're choosing not to spend money on certain items. And so that starts changing the way you think, because it's like, hey, it's not that I'm broke. It's just that I'm choosing to place my money in different areas so that it can eventually be a tool for me.
Yeah.
And so once you have that financial awareness, and then you really drill down onto that financial efficacy, so what you think of yourself in your financial position, that goes into financial literacy. So that's more of like the educational piece. Like, hey, I've got to a point where saving is no longer a problem for me. But now I have this money and I'm only getting like pennies on the dollars in interest in my savings account. What can I do now? Like, does that mean that I just take some money and I learn how to invest in stocks on my own? I have an ebook, Invest in Stocks 101, and I do consultations with individuals. Because sometimes you might be looking at blue chip stocks, which are like your Microsoft, your Amazon, your Apple, Facebook, all of those, and be like, hey, I can't afford that. But a lot of people don't realize that there are over 2,500 publicly traded companies. So even if tech is your industry, there is a tech company that fits your budget. So if that comes to investing, if that comes into like, hey, I want to take this money and put it in a individual retirement account. That way it can be earning interest there. However you want to place your money, even if you want to still say like, hey, instead I want to place it in, I still want it to be in a savings account, you can put your money in what's considered a money market. So it's like, then you start thinking of like, okay, that financial education comes into place, because now you're thinking in different ways that you can literally have your money grow as tools. Taking that money and saying like, hey, I'm going to invest it in, buying and reselling. I'm going to go to a clearance rack, buy some stuff and resell it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Very lucrative market to make sure that, hey, your money is working for you because it's providing another means of income for you.
Yeah.
And then that goes into like how you spend and all of that stuff. So when we're thinking of pretty much knowing yourself financially, and that piece of being self-aware is really just starting from scratch, because you really want to get to the nitty-gritty of your finances for you to build a solid financial future. That foundation has to be solid, because what you don't acknowledge will eventually catch up to you financially. So those are just like some things that I like to put in place from a financial standpoint, because everything should be cohesive, similar to what we talked about last time, like that mind to body connection. They're so closely related that if one thing is off, that can cause a financial spending. You just need to splurge.
Yep.
But if you have that mindset, like everything's not going good right now, instead of splurging, maybe I can just, maybe the market is down right now. I can put some money in the market and then just, sell it later. If that's something that you really just want to do something with your money, instead of spending it on consumer goods, you can literally put it somewhere where your money can make money for you.
Yeah.
So those are just kind of like some key gems.
Break it down. That was, oof, I needed that. And
did I break it down good enough, or?
Yeah, no, you did your thing on that one. That was dope.
Cool. But yeah, those were just like some key items, like, and that correlates to self-awareness too.
Yeah.
And really to the point that when you know yourself as an individual and when you know yourself financially, you don't even put yourself in a position. It came back to me, that second point. You don't put yourself in a position where you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. Keeping up with somebody else, because you had made the statement like, hey, you're out with your friends and you say, hey, I'm gonna get this, or I'm gonna do that too, like a Me Too thing.
Yes.
But y'all in two financial tax brackets.
Yep.
So they could afford it, but you know that you couldn't, but you wanted to do Me Too. No, when you're self-aware, both personally and financially, you be like, okay, great. Are we gonna split that?
Right.
Like, are you gonna split that, or talk to the people around you? And that's one thing that I also tell people as well, because when you say about those subscriptions are killers.
Yes, they are. Add up.
And if you have 10 people on your subscription, that means that you need to take your monthly subscription and divide it by somebody if you're in a financial situation you can't handle it.
Right.
Because that means that somebody has your subscription for free, but you paying for it. So if you're in a situation where you can't really afford that subscription, but everybody appreciates your subscription, Say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, can y'all just, cash at me, wire me $5 every month? Because then you'll be surprised at how consistent and how willing people are. Oh, you only want $5 for Amazon? Okay, here you go.
Right,
I'm
right.
still gonna get my Prime same day delivery, right? Okay, here you go. But it's just certain stuff like that. It's like if you know you're in a situation that if you can positively affect yourself, just think of those intuitive things,
Yeah,
because thinking outside the box is what's really gonna help you grow financially in certain areas.
yeah. All
So
right. You broke all that down. I really don't have much to add from. Well, it's nothing I can add on the financial aspect. I just like how everything you were saying. All I was thinking about, um, like knowing how to save and knowing how to not do these particular activities. That's that mental discipline, and that's just while you're
yeah,
building that up, you're also building something else up, and that's just what's so good. And I hope that through these sessions, the people listening understand like we're trying to show you how close everything is connected. It's not all these things you have to reach for and all these different things. You have to make sure that as long as this good, this will be good.
yeah.
So you want to make sure they all build up, together.
It's like a
Especially
domino effect to
it
me.
is. It really is. It just
It's,
made me think about the physical. Like if my blood pressure is high and I find out my cholesterol is high, what does that mean? That means I'm close to heart attack. That means I'm close to stroke. I'm probably gonna be obese at the time. So it's not it's saying that it's probably gonna happen unless you
yeah,
change something. And that will be stuck in my mind if I'm not doing anything about it. And that's where that stress comes in. But people in those stressed out situations, they're not always going to say, okay, I'm just going to get on a diet, I'm going to change. They're going to be so
hmm
scared, and they keep going back to the things that are getting them in this predicament. So if I'm a cigarette smoker and I know lung cancer might happen, I'm so scared, and people still will smoke a cigarette because that's what calms their nerves at the time. So it's a poison, but they think that, look, that's going to keep me calm at this point. So they're just taking it here, not thinking about their future. And that's really what's so harmful. Like we gotta do better, but so many of us think that way.
but that I think that's a very key point. But that affects in all aspects,
Yeah, yeah,
because guess what? Change is scary
yes, yes, it
and
is.
comfort is dangerous.
Mm-hmm. So dangerous. Yeah, like the last thing I'll say, if you want to know who are your closest people? That pretty much tells you who you are at that moment. You might have people that are different from you, but for the most part, you guys have some key things in common, which is why you all are so close. So if you're close with a lot of people that are doing a lot of negative things, you probably have some things about you that are negative. We always say, I'm the nice one out of the group. I'm this, I'm that. Something about you is harmful, is destructive, and that's what keeps you all together. But if your circle is different and you guys are more uplifters, than bringing people down. If you guys are more supporters, then I hear you, but I'm not listening type of people. Then you have a circle that will kind of help you with that growth that you're trying to get to. So that healing isn't as painful because they're probably trying to do the same thing, but you all support each other to get to that common goal. No different than any support group that's effective. So know your group, know who you are, then know the people around you, and that's really that self-awareness right there.
Again, thank you to everyone that tuned in this time. Next week, we are talking about unhealthy coping behaviors. We
Oh
touched
boy.
on it a little bit, taking some of those unhealthy coping behaviors and actually trying to control that narrative so it's in a better way for you as an individual. Again, I'm Yvonne with Secure Yourself Consulting. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Secure Yourself Co. And Justin, go ahead and close us out with your information.
Yeah, so continue to follow on social media, whether it be Instagram or Facebook under my name. Stay tuned to the Pain to Power podcast, which is available on all platforms, as well as my own support group, Mental Health for Millennials. We try to get that for anybody that wants to join on a variety of different topics. So we're making sure that everyone is healed in a variety of different areas.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, and hope to see you and that you'll tune in again next Wednesday.